Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time SEO. I'm SEO Joe Blogs, and I'm also here joined by Carrie Shepherd. We're in the marketing team at Authoritas. And today we've got a great lineup for you, all talking about the best e-commerce CMSs to use with James and Marco. So we run these Tea Time SEO sessions. We run this on Mondays and Thursdays. And we like everyone to, take that 15-minute break, maybe have a cup of tea if anyone has their tea ready, and connect with others and learn something new. We really encourage you to leave any questions in the chat, and we'll be answering them at the end. So as I mentioned, we are at Authoritas, and we also not just running Tea Time SEO, but we also have a software platform. So we have a new module that has come out called Visibility Explorer. And this allows you to view any competitors, identify the different SERP features, and also you can download up to 500,000 keywords for free. All you need to do is just go to authoritas.com, and there'll be a search bar, and then you can try out the platform. But let us know if you, of course, have any questions. So today's Tea Time SEO, we have about the best e-commerce CMSs. Is it Shopify, Magento, or other? And today I'm really happy to have Marco Bonomo and James Bavington join us for tea. So I'm going to pass over them to introduce themselves.
So hi everybody, my name is Marco. I'm a digital marketing SEO consultant. For the past 5 years, I've been working mainly for agency in London, so passing from small to big agencies. At the moment, I'm working for a big media agency called MediaCom, and also in the past few years, I've been had a chance to speak at conferences. So, for example, in the past 2 years for Brighton SEO, and also been writing a few articles for Search Engine Lens, Search Engine Watch, and some other magazines.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's James, and I'm based agency side, similar to Marco, at an agency called Strategic. And we work with and do SEO for a variety of clients that use a mixture of WooCommerce, Shopify, and Magento. My kind of background, I used to be a developer and very familiar with the WordPress and Magento platforms specifically. Although I've not been to the stage for a few years, I've previously spoken at events like Brighton SEO, Search London, and Gagged. And also a good few years now, back in the days of Magento 1, I was also part of a team of people who designed and built the Magento 1 SEO extension called Creare SEO. And yeah, just a weird random fun fact, I kind of strayed into the world of digital when I was about 14 years old, making a website charting all the skateboard spots in and around my area, which was weirdly featured in a magazine. So yeah, that's my claim to fame.
Good claim to fame. And you also were part of the 10 years in SEO, celebrating 10 years of Authoritas' birthday. Thank you for speaking at Search London. And Marco Bonomo has also spoken at Search London. So hello to everyone that's joined us, everyone that's logged in and not logged in. I'll pass over to Marco, who will then be sharing his top tips.
Cool. So the first tip is about, so when it's time, obviously, to choose the best CMS for your company, or if you're thinking about replatforming to a new platform, my main message is you must choose, but absolutely choose wisely, as per this frame from the movie Indiana Jones. So what I mean talking about this, we are on the next slide, is basically you need to be fully aware about the potential and the kind of limitations you might have dealing with CMS. So in my opinion, there is no good or bad CMS, but each different CMS gives you something, but is going to, obviously is going to cost you something in terms of time and budget and resources you need to implement to make the most out of this tool. So if you start from the bottom left-hand corner, we got WooCommerce. Then we got, once we grow, like in terms of flexibility, what you can do with the CMS, you got Shopify. And finally, if you want, probably one of the most flexible and the most SEO-friendly platforms, you got, in my opinion, in the end, Magento. What does it mean? It means that if you're a small company, if you're running like a small business, probably WooCommerce doesn't require as much budget and resources as Shopify or Magento. Shopify is still a kind of like middle ground. So if you consider WooCommerce or Magento, it's probably like sitting between the two, where Magento, in my opinion, and according to many developers as well, you need to have a kind of like in-house developer to fully make the most out of the platform, which is really, really powerful. But obviously, you need to have more resources. You need to have more budgets. That means that it's going to cost you more money if you want to make the most out of this particular CMS. And we are on the next tip. So we talk about Shopify, but what does it mean? Shopify means is like this very, very closed, fully controlled platform owned by this Canadian company. Over the years, we've seen that this means that you got some limitations compared to WooCommerce or Magento. For example, by default, Shopify is going to duplicate, for example, the collection URLs. Is going to create some like duplications issues. It's going to add a canonic as well. But I would say to make the most of the crawl budget, this is a kind of like limitation Shopify has, and pretty much anybody working in the environment working with Shopify is aware of this. Also, they got a limit in size structure architecture. So basically, it's another limitation of the platform. Also, robots.txt. Out of the box, you don't have full control of robots.txt. Also, like some manual issues. But the key point here is that in my experience working with Shopify, attending conferences, talking to people that has got a really, really deep experience in Shopify, the message is simply this: there is a fix for everything. So if you look deep enough, absolutely, I can guarantee that you can fix pretty much any kind of issues with Shopify, which are not main issues. So you can still pretty much rank anything, even with Shopify. But you need to be fully aware that these kind of like issues, they need to be treated in a very particular way. So you need to have some experience, and you need to look in very particular places if you want to fix these things. And we are on the tip number 3. So we're talking about these kind of different platforms. We talk about WooCommerce, Shopify, Magento. I would say also another key message here is that you got an incredible amount of plugins, extension you can use, you can add to your platform. In Magento, especially in Shopify. Shopify, you got a crazy amount of plugins you can add for the checkout, for the to increase the conversion rate, to write metadata, images, this kind of stuff. But in my opinion, is that just be careful what you're doing with all these plugins, because you don't really want to add so many plugins that at the end of the day, the source code, the code itself on the website is going to be pretty much heavy with all these plugins. So my message, the key message here is that absolutely make the most of the plugins. Plugins really, really, over the past few years, made an incredible difference in how we manage these CMSs. But obviously, just to be aware that you can absolutely use them, but use them with care. And we are on the next slide. So my final message is that is all in the end coming down to experience. I would like to quote this very nice quote from Caesar. So experience is the teacher of all things. My message here to anybody, any like e-commerce manager, any company owner, any CEO, is that you can choose whatever CMS you want. Obviously, you need to make your numbers first, but in my opinion, you should be fully aware that if you want your website, your e-commerce, to be fully optimized for SEO, if you want it to rank properly, you need to rely on SEO agencies. You need to rely on developers which already have are consistent in the experience with this particular CMS. So what you really want is that you want to rely on agencies and companies, in SEO consultants that already have some experience in managing these CMSs. Otherwise, sooner or later, you're going to run into troubles. So my final recommendation is absolutely rely on people with experience. That is going to simplify very much your life. Thanks.
Thanks, Marco. A few tips from myself then, and I'll certainly revisit a few of the recommendations Marco has made. I think the management of plugin and extensions is a sort of recurring thing between our recommendations. So diving in then, I've kind of split my sort of tips out. I've kind of crammed quite a lot in, so I'll talk a little bit quicker than usual and see if we can work through everything. So if we jump to the first slide, I also can't advise just how important it is to choose the right platform, not just for now, but also thinking ahead for the future. Having been working in e-commerce for 10 years, the amount of times we've come across instances where the wrong choices have been made early on because of poor planning. So any e-commerce project, whether you're the SEO, the project manager, the sort of the owner of the business, you've got to run through a thorough requirement gathering exercise. And that relates to inventory size. You're having a big editorial part of the website. That maybe WordPress and WooCommerce would work well with returns management, configurable products. And it's really important to also speak to broad experts. If you go to a Magento agency and say, this is my business, this is what I'm going to do, they'll probably tell you it can work on Magento in the same way a WooCommerce or Shopify specialist might. So if starting a new project, if you're part of the scoping process, be sure to get input and advice from experts in all areas, because everyone will tell you that the platform that they specialize in could work. There's a lot of SEOs on this tea time session, no doubt, and it's important when working with eCommerce CMS and picking a new one to think like an e-commerce manager. So really broaden your own perspective, look beyond your own role and think about things other than how good the SEO can be with your inventory and category structure. Ask what you're achieving now versus where do you see yourself in 2 years. There's been some incredible stories even over the past couple of weeks. I saw Shopify had shared a case study just a few days ago how Lindt, the chocolatiers in Canada, they had no way of selling their chocolate bars with the stores closed. So they literally launched a Shopify site in 5 days. A client of ours was just about to launch their huge e-commerce website, but the agency that they were using to make that have sort of furloughed all their staff and they're not available. So they've had to launch again a short-term Shopify site. So that's been incredibly fascinating. But in the future, if you're looking to have very advanced translations, different store views for different countries, you've got to think forward about what platform is going to be suitable for you and how the CMS is going to help you achieve those business objectives. Who we plugging into, again, has to be a consideration. There's some kind of weird nuances out there, like, for example, Campaign Monitor still haven't built their Magento 2 official extension. You've got to plug in via Zapier. When Facebook announced Shops the other day, they've worked with native support for the more popular platforms, for smaller businesses like Shopify and WooCommerce. They haven't created a native connection yet for Magento. So understanding the systems that your platform needs to talk to is quite important, along with understanding maintainability and cost. So the bigger end of the spectrum, Magento, can be very cost intensive, not just with the physical costs of the development of the server, but also maintaining those security patches, the development hours that will be going in, PCI compliance and so forth. So it's really worth weighing up those CMSs and their maintainability before you make a choice. So jumping on, a couple of tips around just WooCommerce specifically. Before I kind of hung up my developer coat, the last full site I built end-to-end was a WooCommerce website, and really enjoyed the process because it was you still have full control, but also it's a fairly lightweight platform. But from personal experience, if you're working with WooCommerce, be very careful with non-official extensions, and also ones that process payments, for example, off-site. So we've had many encounters at our agency and personally where you might purchase a plugin, install it on the website, and it has got terrible support. They don't upgrade and test their plugin the moment that WooCommerce upgrades its core. So then all of a sudden you upgrade the WooCommerce core, and your extension doesn't work because the developer hasn't got around yet to upgrading it and sorting it out. And you've got to remember with WordPress and WooCommerce, it's very much a hacker target, being the most popular CMS that's out there. So it's really important that if you're using things like payment gateways, try and use the off-site methods rather than having an on-page payment gateway to protect the security of the platform. Staging environments are really important because a lot of people think WooCommerce is simple and cost-effective and DIY, that you don't necessarily need to have a proper staging environment. Again, I've seen multiple examples over the years of clients who have come to us where they've maybe performed an upgrade on their one and only production website and something's broken and they've been unable to roll back, or they've launched things and not tested them properly and it's caused major issues down the line. And with WooCommerce, just simply master the basics of the SEO and what you can do on the platform. It really isn't overly complex. Obviously getting Yoast on there and also the Yoast SEO add-on for WooCommerce. The latter doesn't really do a whole lot, but it does just kind of connect things up and give you a little bit more flexibility to give you everything that you need to kind of get out of the gate with a good SEO setup. And finally, if we can just jump to the next slide, configuring URL structure. The amount of WooCommerce sites I see, you've only got to go onto the WooCommerce website and look at the their case studies to see brands that haven't really got the URL structure right, because you're fighting against the kind of built-in core WordPress posts. Most people don't realize when you're setting like a custom-based URL for your products and things, you can use taxonomies as part of your URL structure. So when we've had various projects we've started in building WooCommerce sites, we very much get this bit right, depending on whether it's the products that are the sort of the showcase of the WordPress website, or actually if they're taking a bit of a backseat to a more editorial site. So it's really good to know what that can do. Okay, and skipping on, last tip for WooCommerce, just what I call color inside the lines. WooCommerce as a CMS can get very complex and quite delicate, frustrating, slow if you try and do more than what the platform is really capable of doing. Keep it simple, keep it lightweight and fast. If you can't, then you maybe should be considering another platform. Right, so last slide from me is on Magento. If we can jump forward, please. So how to tame Magento with hands-on experience. So it's such a beast. The best thing to do is to get that experience before your first build. Be hands-on. So there's a lot of tools in here for sort of SEOs and e-commerce managers alike, from the URL rewrite manager, getting your head around how the caching and indexing works can be a bit of a headache, categorization, how developers can build bits of content in what are called static blocks, but even just doing basic inventory management and the configuration. There's a lot of SEO settings and shop settings in the sort of endless pages of the Magento configuration. And it really is worth working through all of those. And if possible, get yourself a local copy or even a sort of live staging copy of Magento so that you can actually play with it, break it, and install their test data. It really is the most valuable way that you can learn. Swatting up. There's some really good material out there. There's a company in America called Swift Otter who do Magento certification training. You can literally pay about £300 and just sit back and watch about 10 hours worth of content where they train people to be solution specialists on Magento to understand fundamentally what it can do and how the CMS works. They dip into things like the CMS, SEO, analytics, and so forth. So that's really good. And there's some other great content out there. I'm continuing each week reading up on articles. Luke Carthy's produced a great piece on how to manage discontinued products across any e-commerce site. The next part is differentiate what SEO features are native. What's built into Magento that you can utilize out of the box. They've been very good at that right the way back since version like 1.4. What's going to require an extension? So if you want to create meta description templates, some more complex XML sitemaps, understand what needs to be added on. A Masty do a great SEO toolkit extension, and think about what elements in your SEO strategy are going to need custom dev that can't be fulfilled in the CMS or with an extension. So, a very basic limitation that frustrates me with Magento is you cannot differentiate on a category page the H1 from the name of the category, which is quite odd and strange. If you want to have a category called, I don't know, Authoritas, but you want the category H1 to be Authoritas products, then that's a little bit of custom development that can add much more control. The next slide, please. So the other tip is about learning how to talk to developers. I often come across this so much. You have an SEO, they want something actioning, and it kind of goes like this. Can you just sort out the load speed of our Magento website? I've explained to SEO how it's affecting SEO negatively, and it's now high priority. The amount of times that developers are spoken to about SEO problems that they're told to fix them, it's incredibly beneficial if you can get onto the level with the developer and talk to them in a much more different way. So rather than telling them what needs to happen, it's more about approaching them in the right way. So as an example, just for contrast, if we can drop the next slide in. Mind if I schedule 30 minutes of your time so that I can walk through some load speed performance issues I've had? I'd love your technical input on whether we can utilize them. So having been a developer in the past, people are very proud of their work, and if you can appeal to their their sort of technical expertise, their curiosity, their attention to detail, you can collaborate much more effectively on solving bigger SEO issues that you can't solve in the CMS with a developer if you can get them down to your level. It's crazy how I still see, even today with some collaborations that we're doing at our agency, how SEOs just instruct developers to implement things without the rationale, and there really is a much better way to communicate. Next slide, please. So that's to learn how to communicate with developers. And then finally, doubling up on something Marco said, is think about your extensions. Fewer is certainly better, and try and pick a single primary credible extension partner if working with Magento. The amount of times we've come across issues with conflicts, some extensions are great and then they get abandoned because they're maybe not so popular or the company just doesn't exist anymore. I like working with the bigger sort of accredited Magento partners like a Masti, and they typically will have a whole catalog and portfolio of extensions that kind of take Magento to that next level. And the great thing is because they're from the same sort of merchant, they're all tested really well together and can work in harmony, and creates much less conflicts and issues when it comes to things like maintaining upgradability and compatibility issues. So in conclusion, and moving on to the final slide, please, Joe. What is the best CMS in my opinion? And if we can go one more over, please. The simple answer is it depends, or all of them. They all have their own benefits. They all get a medal in my eyes, except for Magento, just purely because I've had a lot of late sleepless nights and working weekends trying to fix things, only to find that Magento then patch it the following day after I've done a whole weekend worth of work. So all great platforms, and they're all popular and have their place in the e-commerce ecosystem for very good reason. As long as you, as a e-commerce manager, e-commerce business owner, or an SEO working with an e-commerce brand, understand the differences and which one is most suitable to your brand, then they all have a great place. So that's my tips.
Great, thank you very much. So many tips that both you, James, and Marco have shared with us today. So I'll pass over to Carrie, who can take some questions from the floor so we can get some additional insights. Over to you, Carrie.
Thank you. So the first question we have is from Monse. Would you recommend to have WordPress and Shopify together? I'm thinking about the solution on a temporary basis. And this to either of you.
Well, I'm going first. It's possible. So you got some companies that decided to split, for example, the blog or some content, really content-heavy parts or website on obviously in a blogging platform as at WordPress, which is ranking very well, allowing you to rank very well for these kind of things. Where at the same time you can have a more like solid, probably e-commerce platform like Shopify. So from my point of view, it's a bit more tricky. So you're going to run probably into a bit more more complexity, but it's still possible. So even it's in the, like I would say, medium long term, it's still feasible.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, we have a few Shopify clients. It's my least experienced CMS, but I would imagine if there's a good rationale to keep the WordPress side, it's because it has some great content on it. It's maybe the best welcoming to the website. You could possibly put the two of them on, one of them onto a subdomain. And it's really all about the user experience. As long as you can seamlessly transition the customers between the WordPress website and Shopify and back again, it could certainly be a viable solution. I don't know if it's possible that you can bring through like a mini cart, for example, from Shopify to WooCommerce, to WordPress. I'd have to check in on that. That may not be possible. But I know certainly WordPress integrates very well with Magento in that sense, with an extension called Fishpig. But yeah, a WordPress and Shopify collaboration would certainly be possible, but I just concentrate on how to balance that user experience jumping between the two.
Great, thank you. That's really useful. And for Marco, you talked about plugins and not having too many. How many would you say are like an optimal amount, or how many are too many?
Well, in my opinion, it really depends on the plugin more than also like, well, you need to consider the numbers. But for example, I had the personal issue where a client was implementing a plugin which is more like rewriting all the metadata. And to install the plugin, they cancel all the previous metadata without saving any of it. So it can be tricky, because you need to be careful what you're doing. Try to say, make backups, try to save as much as possible, and just be cautious when you implement anything. So there isn't like a minimum, maximum number, but just be careful about what the plugin is doing and what kind of work you've done in the past, because you don't want to compromise like all the optimization you've done in the past.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that, Carrie, is if a plugin has a purpose and that's the only way to achieve the result or the most efficient way, then absolutely it should be there. Although it's not a e-commerce website, we've literally just completed a sort of sprint of a WordPress website, and we took their plugin stack down from 75 to about 15. And it was just a simple combination of taking some of the functionality and actually building it into the theme. So we have all the bulk of the plugin, or deploying things like a Facebook tracking pixel via Tag Manager, just to have more of a sort of cleaner, housekeeping of the site. And I think with things like Magento as well, a good Magento developer will tell you that if it's a simple piece of functionality, they should be able to build it out as their own custom module and almost own it themselves and have that sort of technical ownership. It's really when, in my experience, that you start to have plugins that overlap from sort of different developers, that you can start to just get a lot of problems when it comes to testing and incompatibility issues.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Lawrence. Given Google's recent announcement on Web Vitals, will this have any bearing on which CMS you recommend for an e-commerce store in the future?
So I'm currently like studying very much about the impact of core Web Vitals to the sites. We need to make sure that pretty much anybody in the company, from the SEO consultant to the developers to anybody involved in like digital marketing, is fully aware of this. So things like the visual stability, the page load speed, all these elements that are composing the core Web Vitals are obviously really important. And we'll say in some cases like this, all these CMSs are pretty much built for speed to make sure that they don't compromise the visual stability. They're very quick to respond to this, like another third component of the core Web Vitals. There is an interesting, I would say, plugin also in WordPress. I can't remember. I think Salt Agency created it. So you can monitor like straight away these components from the dashboard. So I would say it's more like how you manage your maintenance and how you develop for the future.
I think the only thing I'd add to what Marco has said, obviously, performance is a is a sort of constant challenge with the bigger platforms like Magento. So if I were advising or working on a sort of small business website, maybe using community, self-hosting, it was going to be a very complex website. Even if I had a very good server and we sorted out, varnish and really set it up really well, it ultimately could be a slower loading website than Shopify's proprietary platform, or even a much more lightweight WordPress. So performance and load speed in particular is always a sort of factor. But if a business needs to be on Magento to use those features, I'd maybe even start thinking about looking at things like Magento Cloud, because they offer a sort of self-hosted system from their own infrastructure that's deliberately optimized as best as possible for performance speed. So, Magento agency, a good Magento developer will tell you that they can get Magento running very quickly, but it is hard work, and it all depends on the complexity. So it would certainly be another, the sort of launch of the Web Vitals would be another small push for me to think about PageSpeed as part of that decision-making process at the outset.
Great, thank you. Lawrence just asked Marco, what was the integration into WordPress you just mentioned?
It's a free plugin. So basically, they allow you to check these core Web Vitals in a quicker way. So I think they use the API to pull all the data.
Okay, great. And then we have one final question for James. For Magento, you said get the experience before you first build, but how can you get a proper experience? That course you recommended, does it give you more experience?
Yeah, so the course by Swift Otter is more of a sort of guidance course to fundamentally pass the exam. And it's sort of 10 hours of sort of spoon-fed video introductions to the core functionality and really helping you understand what Magento can do. So in terms of understanding Magento and thinking beyond what it can do SEO-wise and how the platform works, that is a good way, but nothing in my experience beats hands-on practicality. So if you can set up your own copy of Magento on your own little server or just locally on your computer, you can download sample data with Magento, and they kind of add loads of sort of clothing and categories to the site. If you've got that own environment, you can quite literally, build out coupons, do category management, and you can kind of play around with it and actually see how all the settings work and just almost build your own imaginary shop to get that kind of hands-on experience. So it's probably the least easy site to get set up and have your own copy, that you may need some support from a developer in doing so. Or if you use the Swift Otter course and pay their fee, they actually give you access to a Magento enterprise copy, all packaged up, ready to go, that you can use to do the coursework on it with. So all of my experience has come from doing things hands-on, both experimental and solving problems in real time for clients.
Great, thank you. Well, those are all the questions that we have for today, and I'll hand back over to Joe.
Thank you, Carrie. I want to say a big thank you to James and Marco for coming on today and sharing those tips, and especially sharing that course, James. Yes, I understand that we need to always get experience, but sometimes it's the catch-22. So I think if you're working agency side, or even if you can actually set up your own sort of copy of the website at home, that'd be great to get that experience. So if you've enjoyed what you've been seeing so far, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our video. We will be back on Monday, and actually we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, going head-to-head in a competitive niche market. So we have Francois Georges, who is actually in our audience today, and we have Francis Brown talking to us and sharing those tips on Monday, the 15th of June. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us today in our audience. We have a lot of regulars. Appreciate you guys coming back. And we'll be running Tea Time SEO throughout June on Mondays and Thursdays. If anybody would like to be on the stage, as James is and Marco is today, please contact us. Please contact Carrie. We actually have some availability for next Thursday, where we'll be discussing around WordPress. Is WordPress the best CMS? Is it or no? If you want to take part, contact us, and we'll see you on Monday. Thank you very much.